Well, this is something I never thought would happen. You might remember that Pete and I announced we were pivoting to releasing simplified cover versions recently, and then something happened. Then the New South Wales 7 to 10 music draft syllabus dropped, and we pivoted from our pivot, leading to
A double pivot.
yes, which leads to an historic occasion. Three people live in the GBL bunker. And for the first time, Pete, hello.
Hello.
We haven't had a guest before, have we?
No,
We have a guest.
I've only ever been here once. So, yeah, this is my second time.
So an historic occasion. We have our first ever guest who's not actually a guest because he is pretty much soul brother number one, Dr. James Humberstone, FRSA. And we brought James in because this is Music Teacher Reacts, which became Music Teachers Plural, which today is like a virus. We've gone logarithmic or something. It becomes Music Teachers Triple React to the 7 to 10 music draft syllabus.
We just needed another white man to react to this syllabus.
Good point. Which you might like to react to. So we encourage you. So if you're if you're online live with us now, feel free to comment. And which you're probably not, because historically there's usually one person who stays on for 43 seconds. But thanks to everybody who's been tuning in. We've actually gone GBL viral on this series, and actually hundreds of people have been watching these Music Teacher Reacts films, which is what old people call them, and which is pretty cool because we went to a peak body organised event at the Conservatoire, and there really weren't, I mean, it was great. There were a reasonable amount of people there, but to have hundreds of people tuning in thinking about a syllabus, it's that's historic as well. So whilst yes, we're probably not at YouTube viral, it's kind of viral for
A little bit under Mr. Beast.
yeah. I was trying to think of a current YouTube reference, but I couldn't because I'm old. So we're up to episode 4, and we wanted to bring you in on how this all happened and where we got to and what happens next. So we asked James to come along today because James invited Pete and I to be part of a group who was working together to have our say on the draft syllabus. So could you just tell us about that, about the process that we've been involved with?
Yeah, so when I first read the syllabus, I can remember it happened on a day when I wasn't actually teaching. I had about 43 things on priority 1 on my to-do list, and they all dropped down a level because it just seemed like, 19 years since we've had a new syllabus in music for this age group in New South Wales. Such an important moment that really makes such a difference in the lives of children and young people in the future. So dropped everything and live tweeted as I read through it. And I was so excited at the start. I mean, for a start, the last syllabus doesn't begin with its evidence base. You don't get to see that up front. And it was really exciting to see that up front and to see authors who I know and love and really respect the research that they've done and the way that that's impacted practice right around the world. So I was really excited about that. And in addition to the evidence-based stuff as well, just some really clever contemporary moves, sort of decentering the teaching of the concepts of music so that is still something that happens, but it's something that happens through integrated learning experiences in the language of the old syllabus or the current syllabus, performing, listening, composing. But, there's always a but, and I have to say also trying to remove the heavy lifting from teachers by cutting down the outcomes to some nice broad outcomes that can be easily met through differentiated manners. But as I went on, it became increasingly clear that we had these new content lists with bullets after bullets, which when we had the day together with the ASME body, we found out from one of the experts from NESA that they were going to be mandatory points that had to be taught and checked off. So that seemed to be increasing the teacher's load and giving less room for differentiation, and also seemed to be moving away from that evidence base that I'd been so excited about. And then as I went through towards stage 5, so that's years 9 and 10 for people who aren't in New South Wales, there was only one style or genre of music that was mandated. That was Western art music. There was another mandatory topic, which was Australian music, which was fantastic. And it was great to see that as part of that topic, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander music was mandated. So still positives in there, but again, heavy lists of content to be taught. And when we got into those lists, those lists were so incredibly Eurocentric, so really sort of doubling down on privileging the Western art music topic, and everything, whatever music topics you taught, had to be very much assessed and taught through that Western lens, which just seemed to be the opposite way to the way that we were going. And I think Brad and Pete, you've covered that beautifully in the last 3 Reacts videos. So the thing, at this point you can jump up and down and you can say, oh, they've broken the syllabus and I'm really angry, and, get on whatever hobby horse you've got. And of course, those of us who are music teachers tend to have hobby horses. We've got the things that we like. They generally fit nicely with our own musical identities.
Yep.
And so it would have been really easy for us all to go and have a rant. But what I thought was, since the syllabus starts with this beautiful evidence base, not that it's, completely perfect. I would have had a few different things in there and maybe made it a bit more up to date. But since it's there and it is wonderful, why don't we just actually make that point to the to NESA, to the writers, that they've got this great start, but they've kind of really missed it. There's some real painful internal contradictions between that evidence base and what's there. And again, Brad and Pete, you've shown that beautifully in these videos, so I can see that your thinking was very much along the same lines as mine. So I wanted to do that work, but I also didn't want it to be, this radical posh guy who hasn't taught in a classroom regularly for 9 years. That's how long it is since I stopped being a full-time music teacher. And so I wanted to work with teachers, with other researchers, and even we had one pre-service music teacher who's in the BMUS music education at the con. So we had 8 or 9 authors come together. And what I did was to basically just look at that evidence base that we'd been provided, to also get in touch with some of the authors who were cited in that evidence base and see what they thought about it, and they then made recommendations for things that we should read. So to really spend a lot of time several weeks immersed in that evidence base, mostly for boring old academics like me and nerds like these guys, rereading, because we'd probably already read most of that stuff before, in Brad's case about 200 times. But then to actually take that and to have a big group of us who've all read it, interpreted it, make sure that we all agree where those contradictions are, if they're there, make sure that we agree where they are, and then document them really carefully. And talking to people at NESA, they actually said, if you'd like to actually specifically show us what you would do differently, that would be fine too. So as well as writing a report to report where those differences were, also annotating a copy of the draft syllabus to show where we would change things. Sorry, that wasn't a short summary. That was quite a long summary.
No, I think it was a short summary when you think about it. Was a good 3 weeks of you beavering away. So that's pretty good. And so out of that, let's have a look. So out of that, we as a group produced this document, and that goes on for, I believe, 28 pages. 28 pages of of noting and then suggesting a literature-based approach to fixing them. So, but as that internet meme goes, ain't nobody got time for that. Who can read 28 pages?
particularly given the window of opportunity to give feedback was during the HSC music period. So it's problematic if we want to disseminate that in a quick way. It's hard to get people to read 28 pages when they're really flat out and busy.
So I guess also something that I thought was really beautiful about this process was that the three of us were involved in a reading group, and kind of this fix the contradictions group came out of our reading group, didn't it? And our reading group was most recently concerned with reading Elliott and Silverman's Music Matters 2, the second edition of the key piece of evidence cited in the draft syllabus. So we had become accustomed to duking things out via meetings and internet chats and stuff. And so we kind of flowed on from that, and that was a really beautiful process. But I think we came from that very deep familiarity with the literature, which we'd already been discussing for, I think that we spent about 3 months, didn't we, reading Music Matters as a group of about maybe 10 people. And many of those people came on to this contradictions discussion. So, but like I said, ain't nobody got time for that. And so Pete, as a younger member, is interested in social media. And so we thought it'd be really fun, and turns out it was, to harness the power of social media in a social media way. And so as I was, if you scroll back for a couple of videos, in my research on the research, I uncovered that the first piece of evidence cited, Sherrington 2020, seems to be an incorrectly copied Google Scholar reference to a 2019 pamphlet written by a fellow YouTuber, actually, Tom Sherrington, on 10 principles of instruction. And in that, in his pamphlet, the introduction to his pamphlet, which our UCID library actually references as 2019, just FYI, he says that he was inspired. He didn't know about the 10 principles of instruction until he saw an infographic on Twitter. And so an infographic on Twitter, which was based on a 2010 pamphlet, which was based on 1950s and 1970s research into things like mathematics education. So we thought that was pretty funny in a bit sad way. And so, Pete, let's have a look. Tell us about how that all... do we want to just...
Yes. So
it all started here. And we'd love to show you the draft syllabus, but we can't.
But there's an email there.
Yeah.
If you're really interested.
If you wanted to see the draft syllabus. I'm not sure how you get the draft syllabus now if you hadn't already. Perhaps send us a letter and we could mail it to you. And so we've created, Pete, you stayed up all night and created an infographic which cuts to the chase, and based on that funny thing, we thought, what if we turned this whole internet thing around? So, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, we've actually gone deep in the whole YouTube space, and, you kind of see things on search where it's like 19 ways to fix your garage, make it clean, and stuff like that. So we thought, well, that's how the internet works these days. You need to make it engaging, and you need to make it attractive for people to click on something and then read it. And so the idea behind this is that we would be subversive music educators in the spirit of Neil Postman, and copy the exact template of Rosenshine's work. I believe the artist was Barack someone. Yeah.
This was...
there it is.
We scroll down the bottom. Yeah. It was summarised by Oliver...
Oh yeah, there we go.
Caviglioli, or...
Yeah.
Can't read it because I'm old and
yeah.
very small. So that's the original infographic.
Yeah, it's great work. There's lots of nice clip art and
Beautiful.
6 key points. That's easy to...
No, they've got 8.
Oh, they got 8. That's so much better than us.
Yeah. Oh, 10!
Whoa!
Well, there's 10.
Oh, yeah,
because
10.
And just while we're there, just to give the background, so this is an infographic in the, which looks, oh yeah, look at that. He was involved in this as well. So this is the infographic in Sherrington 2019/2020. Okay,
Right.
so that was the backstory, which led us to have a tee-hee, wouldn't it be fun?
Yeah.
All right, well, tell us about the infographic then, Pete.
Yes. So jumped on Canva and produced a nice clip art filled infographic to disseminate on Twitter and Facebook and other platforms. So here is the 6 recommendations for the Music 7 to 10 draft syllabus that are documented in the 28-page long form article. And so this is just an easy way to understand how do we come to the things that we did in our Discord, which, these 6 things represent a lot of effort, a lot of reading, a lot of time, a lot of discussion. And these are the things that we could agree on.
Actually, we hadn't mentioned the Discord. Should we just give that content?
Yeah.
Context? Oh, I'm doing that. Sorry.
It's your Discord.
So just very quickly, for old people like Brad and I, if you don't know what we mean by on our Discord, Discord is a platform that is used by young people to communicate, especially around things like gaming and streaming and those things that young people do. When we were running our reading group, we invited some of the young people into the reading group and said, where shall we do our collaboration? And they said, duh. So we have these different channels, which instead of being based on how to most quickly bridge in Minecraft, are based on things like what is the must-read literature, what would be the nice-to-read literature if you've got time, feedback that we got from the authors. So we had this central online collaboration place, which was a Discord server. Yeah, just so
I actually
you
think it
understand.
worked really well too, like the different threads and streams.
Yeah.
And then when you log back on and you're like, you've got 10 things that you need to catch up on, and so you could easily catch up on the discussion.
Yeah, it was great to have a repository for people who were uploading things and putting links to things, and you just knew that no matter what, you could check in and go, what's the most recent conversation? Where was that link to that thing? It was really beautiful. It was excellent. But we learnt, I think, in our reading group that Zoom is a really great platform for having online meetings.
Yeah.
Discord was a really great place to. But I guess
Text. Yeah.
I guess through the last few years, most people have become pretty comfortable on Zoom. Anyway, so that's the background to how this all came about.
Yeah, and just on the infographic, so the idea behind this is to steal something that was famous and got shared widely, retweeted. And just being subversive in the fact that we stole this piece of evidence's layout, which is just an infographic, which we think is kind of out there. If you're going to write a syllabus, you're going to base it on an infographic. So we thought, man, that'd be pretty damn funny if we made an infographic fighting against the infographic. So battle of the infographics is what we see here.
Yeah. And so that's it. So they were these are the infographic piece of advice that the group came up with. And let's not read it out because that wouldn't reading an infographic.
They can find it online. We'll link it down below. There you go.
So something that's been really great. So it's really good to have this discussion within our Discord has been amazing. And it's been so cool to be forced to go back to the literature and really wrestle with the application of the philosophy, of the outworking and the real lived experiences of what it's going to mean for potentially 20 years. Let's hope not. Let's hope we get more regular syllabus refreshing. But the lived experiences for the next 20 years. And so to actually go, what does the literature say? What should our syllabus say? And there's that thing about if anytime you put 2 music teachers in a room and say, what's your opinion on this? It'll end up in tears. So even within our group, there was often quite a bit of what would you say? Well, there was some healthy debate, wasn't there, on lots of things. That was really invigorating.
It's actually really easy to have healthy debate when you have to bring everything back to the literature as well. It's just, it's just the absolute opposite of Twitter debate or something like that, where people are loudly shouting their opinions. Because if somebody says something and it doesn't sit well with you, then you can ask to be pointed to where that is in the evidence base. And if the person you're discussing it with can point you to where it is in the evidence base, then bang, you move your position.
Yeah, which brings us to let's close up on the infographic, and just reminding ourselves that we wrote a 28-page, and I felt like I didn't really get out most of what I wanted to talk about. I only scratched the surface in 28 pages, and so we've already had, speaking of the Twitterverse, we've already had some interesting. What would you say? Some interesting conversation via Twitter based around the infographic. And I think, I guess that was one of our points, was the reductionistic thing of you've got everything that anybody's ever thought and done about music and music education. You've got our report, which goes on to 28 pages, and you've got a 6-point infographic. That's kind of the point. And so some of the debate on Twitter has been around you've missed, you haven't properly, and I guess that's the point of the infographic, is never going to cover the nuance of all of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah, and
would like to talk
a subversive way to perhaps point out that some of the, I mean, we really didn't want to critique the evidence base, but because it is, essentially fantastic, but in the process of looking at, I mean, for instance, Professor Tom Rogelski and Professor David Elliott both came back to us and said, well, you should look at my most recent books, because the books that had been cited from them, or the papers that had been cited from them, were around 20 years old. And so, of course, they weren't being rude about it and saying, why have you cited old work? And, but of course, research moves on, and it is strange to cite something that was published around the same time as our last syllabus, when we've had several decades of work since. So I guess even though we weren't critiquing the evidence base, we did have to deal with the fact that it wasn't completely up to date, and that while it did summon the definitely the spirit of where we've come from in New South Wales, the shift from aesthetic music education, that sort of music education that was all about music appreciation and definitely privileging Western musics, especially Western art music, towards inclusive music education, specifically praxial music education, as defined by Alperson, Rogelski, and Elliott, the last two of whom were cited in the evidence base. To recognise that and think about, well, where is that research now? And also, of course, then you also can't help but think, what else have we learned in music education? Many of us had the immediate response, and you can see from the infographic that we're talking about more culturally inclusive and culturally diverse language. Well, cultural diversity music education is a field that's absolutely boomed over the last 20 years. There's so much amazing research, and it's really beautiful research that's really based in that sort of nice close cycle of research and practice. So this isn't necessarily something that's just happening in the academy. Lots and lots of schools doing really, really amazing work. And the other area that would be happening in would be the informal learning music, which was probably only just wasn't even happening when the last syllabus. Lucy Green had only just published her first book when the last syllabus was done. So we've got 20 years of really interesting practice around that, which especially impacts on how we can do contemporary popular music in the music classroom. So while not wanting to criticise the evidence base, because we really like the evidence base, there was a question of updating it. And when we look then also at the evidence base critically, then you realise that some of the threads in there were not as strong as others. So there is a slightly subversive thing about making an infographic in the style of an infographic, which has somehow led to something being cited from the was it you said, Brad, an infographic of a pamphlet of a
A pamphlet.
yeah.
And I think something you just skimmed over is that you actually went out and reached out to these authors and asked for their comment on how the New South Wales syllabus had quoted them and referenced them. But like three of the major ones, so David Elliott, Rujelski, and Peter Dunbar Hall all came back at you, right? Take us through that, and isn't that amazing that they care about us? And
absolutely incredible. I mean, these, we call them heavyweights. Heavyweight.
We call them
academics.
the cats.
The cats, yes. Yeah. Sorry, yes. There's some GBL language. The cats of music education philosophy. And look, we've already talked a lot about praxialism and music education philosophy. And when these guys do their third pivot, I'm sure they'll do a series on praxialism in Australian classrooms as well. That's coming. But let's also not underestimate the amazing work of Peter Dunbar Hall and the document that he sent us, just critiquing excerpts of the syllabus that he'd had time to look at and just saying, the language is all wrong. Some of the language used, we'd moved away back in the 1990s. It's actually, I referred to it in the report as the way of triangulating our findings, because it's very difficult as a researcher to take yourself out of the research. In fact, you can't. You actually totally can't ever take yourself out of the research. So your bias is always there in some level. So you've got to find these ways of saying, is this just me finding what I want to find, even though you've done your review and your analysis as carefully as possible, and you've shared your methodology as openly as possible. So to be able to go back to the people who wrote the stuff that the evidence base is based on, and then have them come back and find exactly the same problems with it, saying, the language is bad, it reads more like a music appreciation course than a music syllabus, it's not open enough, it's not culturally diverse enough to get that from those cats who've been cited. It strengthens our argument, and they get, we asked them and they gave us permission to share that, what they had said. Also, as well as strengthening our argument, it's just, it's a good way of triangulating what we thought we were already seeing anyway and saying, yep, it's definitely there.
So amazing to think that the cats are just waiting there on the sidelines, waiting for somebody to say, hey guys.
And generous too, like offering
so
us
generous.
Unpublished work and things like that. It's just
That's right. Yeah. That thing of, well, I've done more work since, and I think I've published better research since 2005. And by the way, here it is attached, and plus the book that I've just finished writing that won't be published for another year. So the insight that they were so generous to lend us was fantastic.
Yeah, really beautiful, and such an inspiration for us slightly younger people to look towards.
So I guess we should link to that below as well. I don't know who does the linking in this team, but to the published work.
Yes.
Whoever gets there first.
Yeah. And the GBL bookshelf. I almost said bookshop. Freudian. The GBL bookshelf on our GBL blog. Link below us there, geekbasedlearning.com. We have a bookshelf, and I think we're working towards all of these more recent books being on there as well. And in the last video, we put extensive links to the literature cited in the syllabus as well. And I think there's a couple of... so we'll replicate that, and stay in touch with us via geekbasedlearning.com, and which just reminds me that... So how can you get involved? Well, you can wouldn't it be great, though, to contact them there and just say, we still care.
Yeah.
We still care, and we really want you to get onto this and get it right, or as right as we can. I couldn't help but think that as you're talking about objectivity, I was thinking about Lincoln and Goober, the Constructivist Credo, page 20, which is in the cited evidence on, on objectivity. It's pretty funny. It's all there. it's all there for us. Just some incredible scholarship
Yeah.
since 2003,
Yeah.
when our current syllabus was published.
Yeah.
And man, the cats, like we keep saying,
Yeah.
the cats are working hard to help us, and we just have to know.
Yeah. And we have to look, we've been really lucky that a few people at NESA have been happy to talk to us and me directly during this process. But there's obviously some fantastic writers on that team. And, so even though we're being critical, that's the job of, in fact, it's the job of a teacher. It's not just the job of an academic. Critical thinking is a core thing in the Australian curriculum. So we are being critical, but we're being critical by recognizing that there's some fantastic work in this syllabus. It's a draft. To me, it looks like a very early draft. But when the evidence base as it is has got so much that to very, very easily, if we align the evidence base as it is without making any changes, align the evidence base to the syllabus, we can end up with a great syllabus. And if we actually took a critical approach, maybe did one more draft round and applied the evidence base and updated the evidence base, I think we could have a world-leading music syllabus, because there are so many fantastic ingredients there, and there's so much great work that's been done in music education practice and research over the last 19 years since we had the last one. And I would say that I think you pointed this out, Brad, the 2003 syllabus, when you were doing the side-by-side comparison, it actually stands up remarkably well. There are a few words in there that you would probably move, and the thing that actually NESA have done with just trying to decenter the concepts of music and saying they should be embedded rather than sort of explicitly taught, embed those in the music learning. If we made those adjustments to the 2003 syllabus, it would actually be right up there anyway. So we're in a really good position, and there's some great people doing some great work in that community. So we now just have to cross fingers that those 6 problems, so beautifully illustrated in yellow and black, can be fixed, addressed in this next period.
Yeah, and I would just challenge you, Dr. Humberstone, FRSA, to you said that we could have a world-leading syllabus. I think we should. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. If a group of 10 of us could come around the literature and write a 28-page thing of how we could make it better, we've done that work. And that's just a small group of us. There must be lots of people thinking about this. So we had a great syllabus that was of its time, and this is the opportunity to have a greater one. And so there's our link at the bottom. Pete's really good at making lovely extra bits underneath the video.
Thanks, Brad.
See what I just did there?
Speaking of extra bits, I was thinking about just starting a tradition, because not every day that you get a professor into your into your bunker. So we appreciate gigs, obviously, gig-based learning. Excuse me. Can you tell us about your upcoming gigs and things you're writing or composing, and maybe just tell the audience what's coming up for you?
Self-promotion.
Yeah, it's an interview. What's coming up for me? Good heavens. So I've got 3 book chapters coming out. One of them co-authored with this guy. So there's a fantastic book called The Routledge Book of Musical Creativities in Education. I've just said that wrong. It's edited by Clint Randalls and Pamela Bernard. And we wrote a chapter in it sort of analysing how when Dewey explained to us the simplistic dichotomies that go on in schools over 100 years ago, we can still identify those exact same problems going on. And we talk about pendulum swings from the kind of conservative versions of education towards the more progressive versions of education, or if you like, constructivist towards instructionist, based on beautiful examples from Brad's career. And another paper that I wrote with a student of mine who is also a teacher, an amazing teacher, Kaylin Sanderford, which is we're looking at a project that I did in 2016 where I brought a hip-hop rapper and a producer into the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. And I did it as specifically really as an educational project. I wanted to give my students experience working in a diverse musical culture, and one that is pretty deviantized, to use Alexis Callio's words, in education, because, you know, hip-hop's got all those naughty things going on. One interesting thing that several of us have noticed doing lots of reading around hip-hop and education is how interesting it is to compare the language used around it from those who don't think that it's appropriate to have it in music education, and the language used about jazz 100 years ago. Jazz, all that naughty music.
Do you like jazz?
You do like. That's where you need another camera there.
Yeah.
Nice. So I brought those artists in, but we also created, as well as teaching around hip hop, we also created an artistic work. So for Peter Tregear, that's where my joke about Athena and the Odyssey comes from, because working with Greek-Australian rapper Luca Lesson, we rewrote Homer's Odyssey to give it a 21st century twist, and we did it as a big orchestral, choral, hip-hop, cinematography, spoken word poetry thing. And so in the chapter that we've written, Caitlin and I look at that as an example of transcultural music education activism. So looking at how that changes the experience for students and the impact that it has, and what can we learn from that kind of project in the conservatory, in a traditionally conservative music institution. It's especially interesting looking at it at this time when so much is changing in that world, and has changed since we did that project. And then the third chapter that I've got coming out is an ongoing project that I'm working on. Actually, this is where I would like to do some self-promotion. I'm doing a chapter. I was asked to write a chapter for another Routledge guide, this to how composition is being taught internationally. And I was asked whether I could do the Australian chapter, which of course is an almost impossible challenge, because there is no single way that anything is taught in music in Australia, even though we have an Australian curriculum. By the time we get to years 11 and 12, it's different everywhere, even if we have Australian curriculum aligned. And of course, state by state, there's so many other differences anyway. So writing the Australian chapter was, more or less impossible. So I did a job of it for that chapter, which will come out later this year as well in that Routledge handbook. But more importantly, I kicked off an ongoing project, which is going to be a real longitudinal project, where I'm talking to expert teachers of music creation. And I'm saying music creation rather than composition, because I'm interested in singer-songwriters and producers and MCs and DJs, people who teach musical creativity but might not think of themselves as composers or people who compose. I'm trying to use more inclusive language. And so I've done 4 interviews now. I've got another couple set up in the future. I gave a paper on this, work in progress, at the last ISME conference. And so, that's where I will do some self-promotion, actually. So if the way that we do this is that we can simply involve anyone who is recognized as an expert at teaching music creation. So if you know someone who's an expert and you'd like to tell me about them, you can. And that's how our participant stuff works. Yeah.
Is Twitter the best place to talk to you?
Oh yeah, or just my email is on the Sydney University website, so you can spam me any way you like. So that's
comment on this video even.
Yeah.
Comment on this video even. Yeah. Just really interested to talk to people, whether you're doing, super old school pen and paper, manuscript, a quill, or whether you're, teaching young people to write beats in Ableton Live or whatever. Want to talk to people about how they do it, how they do that teaching role.
That's great, James.
Yeah.
So that's part 4 of Music Teacher Reacts. I feel like we've really pushed the bunker today to it was never designed. The bunker was never designed for a three heads talking heads video. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out, and it's just been. This is an historic, not just an historic occasion that we've got three people in the bunker, and that Pete and I have pivoted again, and any minute now we'll pivot back to our simplified covers. But let's stay engaged, everyone, and let's follow this thing through and keep the pressure on so that not our agenda, not your agenda, but that we get the evidence-based syllabus for Music 7 to 10 that we've been promised, that rests on the best thinking and the best evidence we have available to us at the moment, that is articulated in the most care-full and loving and loving fashion for generations to come. So, on behalf of GBL, Brad and Pete and James, let's just put that email address. So if you're thinking, all right, I really should have, was it back this way? I really should have had a crack. There's an email address to just say, I've just been watching Brad and Pete and James, and I want in. And let's keep these people, whoever, the man, that's a big part of GBL, sticking it to the man. So let's keep the man accountable and get the syllabus our students deserve. All right, until next time, until the next pivot. And who knows, like if we make Music Teacher Reacts video 5, who knows how many people might be in the bunker next time. All right, take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Whoops. Oh, hang on, ready? And then